The Honourable Member for Airdrie Cochrane.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Perhaps the most vital responsibility of government is to protect its citizens, and COVID-19 is a prime example of that. Facing an unknown virus, having limited information from Communist China, a country that clearly withheld critical information from the international community, governments around the world had to make tough decisions regarding the health and safety of its citizens. The well-being of those individuals, their family members, their communities was paramount, or at least it should have been. In the wake of thousands of people dying around the world, and with panic of the unknown from this pandemic, there are measures that should have been undertaken quickly. In Taiwan, they immediately cut ties with the socialist Marxist Chinese regime and stopped all traffic from China. Our Prime Minister did not do that. Justin Trudeau and his team held on to their ideology about open borders. They said it was discriminatory and racist to shut down border traffic. Even after every province in Canada had called a state of emergency, the Justin Trudeau government continued to allow international travel without restrictions, quarantine, or health screening. Trudeau continued to allow hundreds of illegal foreign nationals to cross the border at Roxham Road every day without adequate health measures being taken. These decisions allowed the pandemic in Canada to spread and increase the country's mortality rate significantly. If the federal government had acted as other successful nations, thousands of lives could have been saved. Thousands perished unnecessarily because this Prime Minister and his ideology. In Canada, we now have well over 7,000 COVID-related deaths in a matter of a few months. And sadly, there will be many more. And in 2018, Canada had 249 gun-related homicides, with a large percentage from illegally owned firearms. Justin Trudeau had an opportunity to save 10, 20, or even 30 times this amount of people around the pandemic. But he refused to act because it was not in line with his ideology. And now, a misguided Justin Trudeau is at it again, making criminals of tens of thousands of Canadians overnight without adversely affecting a single true offender. This virtue-signaling Prime Minister is using the tragedy in Nova Scotia to implement his ideologically driven political agenda to steal private property from law-abiding citizens. What happened in Nova Scotia is indescribably tragic, and I can't imagine the pain that is being felt by those families from this senseless act. But the removal of legally purchased, registered guns by licensed owners would have no effect on what happened in Nova Scotia. In fact, the Prime Minister and the Liberal government have paid little attention to the actual issues surrounding this incident. What happened in Nova Scotia utterly defines the problem. The shooter was an individual that illegally possessed weapons, had a criminal history, a history of violence and domestic assault, one of substance abuse, and showed signs of mental illness. If this federal government truly intends to have a positive impact, then control the trafficking of illegal firearms that are flooding across our southern border. Establish appropriate laws that punish violent offenders and provide more support to those with mental illness and develop specific protocols for dealing with individuals that have violent tendencies. Justin Trudeau is spending $600 million taxpayer dollars to purchase weapons that will not save lives. In reality, this Liberal government is doing everything they can to make matters worse in this country. They repealed the mandatory minimums put in place by the Harper government. They're moving to lighter criminal sentences and made it easier to obtain pardons. They're weak on bail and parole measures. They want to reduce border controls where illegal guns and drugs are transported. They refuse to act against gangs and organized crime that are at the forefront of the illegal arms trade in Canada. This abandonment of responsibility to Canadian citizens has left victims and survivors awestruck. And a large part of why the Liberals do this stems from their belief that all criminals are reformable and they are better out in society rather than in prison where they actually belong. And you see this in their actions. They send child murderers to healing lodges, and they give $10 million to terrorists. The Prime Minister, he protected himself from potential legal issues around SNC. Bill 75, introduced in 2018, reduced the sentences on a variety of serious, unjustifiable offences. The Liberals' actions confirm they are soft on crime. And this gun ban does nothing to put the real criminals behind bars. Ronald Reagan stated, "Those who seek to inflict harm are not going to be fazed by gun control laws." So ask yourself, do you believe that individuals must be held accountable for their actions? Do you believe that those who commit violent crimes should be allowed to walk around loose in society, as the Liberals would have? Or should we prioritize protecting our communities, our families, our children? The Liberals call this a common sense law, but in reality, it is complete nonsense. It is estimated that about 1/3 of gun owners will actually submit their possessions in this so-called buyback, a buyback of products of which they never owned in the first place, so they can't really buy it back. But apparently, the federal government will be required to send in officers to forcibly remove private property from the remaining 2/3 of these gun owners. Madam Speaker, it's interesting. In the wake of COVID-19, gun and ammunition sales escalated. So why do you think this is? Well, it's because people wanted to protect themselves, and observing the recent deterioration of accountability in society, they became fearful. Fearful that there would not be adequate enforcement to defend their families, and they did not trust the federal government to protect them. And how can you blame them? We just had blockades across this country, saw criminals commit federal crimes without resistance. These culprits burned locomotives. They sabotaged railway tracks, causing derailments. Attacks of domestic violence that went unchecked and unpunished by the Trudeau government. Warren Buffett pulled out of a $9 billion LNG investment in Quebec, citing political unease about investing under these very Liberals. To further complicate matters, there was a discussion on releasing federal prisoners into society because of COVID. So, people legally acquired arms, and now they are criminals in the eyes of Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government. It should be noted, by the way, that military-grade weapons have been banned in Canada since 1978. Justin Trudeau's ban on assault-style weapons, as he calls it, is based on subjective views of the external appearance of the gun, rather than its mechanical abilities. He is discriminating based on appearance. It's playing identity politics in the firearms industry. Mr. Speaker, this is really about slowly taking away the rights of Canadians in a step-by-step fashion. This Prime Minister has openly spoken of his admiration for the brutal Communist Republic of China and his love for the human rights criminal Fidel Castro. Now, this Liberal government is taking action to implement similar policies found in oppressive regimes. First, disarm the public with a gun ban. Then, we could look at the recent power grab by Trudeau, where he tried to obtain fiscal control without Parliament's consent. They monitor social media, pushing to censor internet content that align with their leftist agenda. The Liberals are doling out huge grants to only those media outlets that support their views, effectively ending free press. The Trudeau Liberals made changes to seize more control during elections. And they amended Section 253 of the Criminal Code to allow peace officers to enter a person's home up to a period of 2 hours after driving to give breathalyzers. Now, this is blatantly unconstitutional, and I don't believe officers would do this anyway. Madam Speaker, the moves and attempts made by this federal government to infringe on the civil liberties of Canadians continues to unfold. In February, Trudeau was called the most dangerous man in Canadian political history because of the draconian tactics he and his government are pursuing. And this latest move to create criminals of law-abiding citizens is a continuation of his socialist agenda and mission to consolidate power. It's time for Alberta to have a voice in Confederation.
Hear, hear.
It's time for Alberta to obtain our own Chief Firearms Officer.
Hear, hear.
It's time for a review of provincial policing. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, Alberta are not going to stand for the antics of Justin Castro. The citizens of this province spoke loud and clear at the last federal election regarding the trust they have for this Liberal Party. And this UCP government will be there to defend and protect Albertans.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Hear, hear.